Music. What's wrong with you? There are pins in it. What did you think you'd find in a pin cushion? Chicken noodles? When Art Carney was 76 years old, he finally said something that shocked all the fans of the Honeymooners who had loved the show their whole lives. For many years, people thought the friendship between Ralph Creighton and Ed Norton was natural and easy, the kind of TV magic that you just can't fake. But Carney told everyone that behind all the laughs, he almost quit the show forever. The reason? Jackie Gleason. Gleason was amazing on TV, but when the cameras weren't rolling, he was wild, explosive, and really hard to work with. He refused to practice his lines, he drank too much, and he had a bad temper that caused problems all the time. Carney was the kind of person who liked to be prepared, and he almost couldn't take it anymore. The shocking truth he told later in his life changed how fans thought about the beloved TV show. How could the show keep going when its stars were ready to tear each other apart? TV in the early 1950s was still figuring out what it wanted to be. Families sat around small black and white TVs, wanting shows that could make them laugh and help them forget about the tough times after the war. That's when Jackie Gleason showed up, a comedian who had perfect timing and a personality that filled up any room he walked into. Gleason was already becoming famous when he created the skit that would later become The Honeymooners. At first, it wasn't a full TV series. It was just a part that kept coming back on the Jackie Gleason show, where the rough bus driver, Ralph Creighton, would fight and bond with his lovable neighbor, Ed Norton. The audience loved it right away. They saw themselves in those working-class problems, the small apartments, the dreams of becoming rich, and the endless fights between husbands and wives that always ended up being about love. Choosing Art Carney to play Ed Norton was brilliant. Carney brought warmth, physical comedy, and a special rhythm to the character. His Norton wasn't just a sidekick. He was just as important, a character who kept Gleason's Ralph from being too mean. Viewers loved how they balanced each other out. Gleason was the loud one. Carney was the heart. Together, they created something that no TV producer could plan. Real magic on screen. By the time The Honeymooners became its own 30-minute sitcom. In 1955, everyone was super excited about it. People watched it every week, and for a short time it seemed like nothing could stop it. Critics said the writing was great, audiences repeated the lines, and Ralph and Norton became famous characters that everyone knew. To everyone watching, it looked like a perfect match between two men who were meant to work together. But while people laughed in living rooms all across America behind the scenes, things were already starting to fall apart. Gleason's talent came with chaos, and Carney, even though he seemed happy on screen, was already starting to feel stressed out. The world saw comedy history being made, but for Carney, the problems were quietly starting. And soon, the very things that made Gleason so electric on TV would make him almost impossible to deal with behind the scenes. To understand why Art Carney almost quit The Honeymooners, you first need to understand Jackie Gleason. On screen, he was magnetic, quick-thinking, and bigger than life. The life of the party in every way. But behind the scenes, he was completely different. Gleason was like a storm, unpredictable and impossible to control, with a reputation that mixed being brilliant and being difficult in equal amounts. He was both a comedy genius and a bully, depending on what day it was. One of Gleason's gifts was his amazing memory. He could look at a script once and remember every word, every moment, and every cue. This should have been helpful, but instead, it made him arrogant about preparing. While most actors needed to rehearse to get better at their lines, Gleason thought rehearsing was a waste of time. He believed comedy happened in the moment, that real laughter came from being spontaneous, not from practicing. And because he was the star, he demanded that everyone else on the cast do things his way. For Art Carney, this was pure torture. Carney was a craftsman, the kind of actor who needed rhythm, timing, and careful preparation. He studied scripts, analyzed the beats, and believed that having structure was what made humor work. Gleason's chaotic methods took away that safety net. Instead of steady preparation, Carney was forced to improvise all the time. Every day felt like walking into a performance blindfolded, hoping he could keep up with whatever Gleason decided to throw at him. And then there were Gleason's habits when he wasn't performing. He was famous for showing up late to the set, often after long nights of heavy drinking and gambling. Crew members whispered about his temper, about how easily he would explode when something didn't go his way. Writers were scared of him, knowing he might throw out an entire script at the last minute. Producers learned not to argue with him. Even directors, who normally controlled how a show ran, found themselves pushed aside. Gleason was the star, and what Gleason wanted, Gleason got. The stories became legendary, tales of Gleason disappearing for hours in the middle of a filming day, leaving the cast waiting only to come back with a new big idea that everyone else had to adjust to right away. Times when he would rewrite scenes on the spot, ignoring the careful work of writers who had worked for weeks. One moment he was generous and funny, buying drinks for the crew. The next, he was like a hurricane of anger, lashing out at anyone nearby. The more famous he became, the worse his temper got. TV networks and sponsors put up with it all because Gleason brought in huge ratings. For Carney, though, the pressure was crushing. To match Gleason's energy on camera, he had to give up his natural instincts. Lines that should have been carefully rehearsed were thrown out on the fly. Scenes turned into improvisation, forcing Carney to react instantly without the safety of being prepared. The audience loved the results, laughing at the energy and praising how real it seemed. But Carney felt himself getting smaller under all the pressure. He couldn't predict which Gleason he would meet each day, the charming performer who made him laugh or the bully who made him feel terrible. To the fans, the comedy looked easy. To Carney, it was built on being exhausted, frustrated, and having his nerves stretched too thin. He never complained publicly during those years. He smiled for cameras, played his part, and carried the image of Ed Norton with grace. But inside, the unpredictability was eating away at him. Every day on set reminded him that he was stuck in a partnership that might destroy him. And soon, the clash of styles would push him to the very edge of walking away from the show that had made him famous. Art Carney wasn't a man who wanted the spotlight. Unlike Jackie Gleason, who loved the roar of the audience, Carney was quiet, methodical, and happiest when he could prepare and deliver his work perfectly. That difference in personality turned every filming week into a nightmare. Gleason insisted that rehearsals took the humor out of the material. Carney, however, believed that practice was what created confidence. Being forced to wing it in front of millions made him anxious and angry. The pressure never stopped. Gleason's sudden script changes. His drinking-fueled unpredictability and his outbursts left Carney feeling trapped. Crew members later remembered how Carney would go backstage, smoking nervously, muttering about how he couldn't keep doing this forever. His wife at the time even admitted that he would come home drained, often wondering if he should just walk away. Carney's own high standards made the situation worse. He hated giving a sloppy performance, but Gleason's style left him no choice but to adapt on the fly. For a perfectionist, that felt like torture. Carney knew the audience was laughing, but he felt his craft was being ruined. The man who had been praised for his physical comedy, his perfect timing, and his subtle delivery was being reduced to just surviving Gleason's chaos. The breaking point came during the show's most demanding times, when filming and live appearances piled up on top of each other. Carney told friends that he was ready to quit. He didn't care about the fame or the money. The stress of working under Gleason's iron control seemed unbearable. Yet despite being ready to quit, Carney stayed. Something pulled him back each time he was ready to walk away. And it wasn't loyalty to Gleason. It was something much more complicated. Walking away from the Honeymooners would have been easy in theory, but in practice, Art Carney knew the stakes were much higher than just leaving a job. By the mid-1950s, the show was a national obsession. Viewers watched it religiously, quoting lines in offices, schools, and living rooms across the country. Carney was no longer just another working actor. He had become Ed Norton, a character people loved almost as much as Gleason's Ralph Cramden. Stepping away would have meant not only risking his career, but also disappointing millions of fans who adored him. There was also the money. Television in those days wasn't as profitable as later decades, but being on a hit show brought steady paychecks, sponsorship deals, and opportunities that Carney might never see again. For a man who had struggled for years to make a living in show business, walking away from that kind of security was terrifying. But it wasn't just about fame or financial comfort. Carney, in his own quiet way, respected Gleason's talent. He may have hated the unpredictability, but he recognized genius when he saw it. Gleason could hold an audience in the palm of his hand, and Carney knew that.